Be honest. Do you find it almost impossible to get out of bed in the morning? Is it like an absolute hassle? Or I guess I could say the afternoon if that's what your schedules come to. And even when participating in an activity that you really enjoyed at one point, even with loved ones, does your brain simply not produce those feel-good chemicals that everyone else seems to feel? Personally, I've struggled with depression since I was about 12 years old. I could never find enjoyment in normal childlike activities that every other kid did. So, while I matured through my preteen years to almost 16 years old, I had to indulge in as much instant gratification as possible because that's the only way I knew how to obtain enjoyment. Of course, if you're a depressed person who has attempted to truly improve their lifestyle, you know that good self-care habits, academic habits, and social habits can be really hard to maintain. Now, I'm going to stop with the negativity. Today, consider depression your number one enemy, and let's talk how to stomp that enemy.
All right, let's talk about nature, or in this video's case, we're going to be talking about living naturally. Living naturally is the most surefire, research-backed way that you can increase your skin health. Eating healthy and eating a natural diet, getting sunlight. I mean, everybody knows that these are like surefire ways to like help improve your mental health and your physical health, right? I feel like that's common knowledge. And actually, research shows, you can look at the medical study if you'd like to, but if you go outside, let's say you wake up in the morning and the first thing that you do is get on your phone and you scroll through TikTok or you scroll through Instagram, and that's what you do for like an hour or so right before you get up and go do some work. Well, instead of doing that, what about getting out of bed and walking outside? And assuming the sun is still up, hopefully, getting up and going outside and getting at least 15 minutes of sunlight is scientifically proven to help your serotonin production. And if you don't know what serotonin is, it's the chemical in your brain that helps keep your mood stable, as well as make you like feel happy and have a sense of well-being. So obviously most people care about their happiness and their well-being and their mood during the day, right? So just take that into account for one of the tips in this video on how to not feel as depressed. In the morning, let's change up that routine of yours. Don't get on your phone first thing in the morning, because if you get on your phone first thing in the morning, you're gonna shoot your cortisol levels up, because in the morning your cortisol levels are already so high. But if you go onto TikTok and start overstimulating your brain with all these different news sources and just like it shows you everything that's happening in the world, you're not meant to wake up and see that first thing in the morning. That's not natural. That's definitely going against nature, right? Okay, and so for the tip that I just talked about for sunlight, I'm not the one making these tips. Like, these are science-backed tips, and these are tips that I also get from Stanford professor Andrew Huberman. He has a PhD in psychology, and obviously he teaches science at Stanford. But he also has a podcast called, I think it's Huberman Labs, and I think that honestly, no, I know that his podcast has improved the quality of my life just by listening to it. I'm not sponsored or anything, obviously. My channel's so small, who cares? So I'm just telling you, if you want to help your mental health, listen to this guy. He knows what he's talking about. And if you don't want to, it's fine. I'm going to be talking about his tips and tricks to help regulate your mental health. And of course, for this video, we're talking about stomping depression because, nobody likes to feel depressed. Another tip that Andrew Huberman gives us is whenever you wake up in the morning and like I just said, your cortisol levels are already so high, the last thing that you want to do is make it worse by just chugging down a cup of coffee before you go and do whatever you do. Instead of chugging down your cup of coffee within the first minutes of waking up, give yourself an hour to an hour and a half, so 60 minutes to 90 minutes before you drink a cup of coffee. And if you do that, not only will it lower your cortisol levels, or at least not increase them, so you'll feel less stressed throughout the day if you do that. If you're a coffee drinker, you know that if you drink coffee, caffeine comes with a crash, right? But if you drink it 60 to 90 minutes, it heavily reduces the crash that you feel during the day. So yeah, less anxiety and less crash. So for my coffee drinkers out there, I don't see why you shouldn't follow this. However, he does mention if you use coffee or just caffeine in the morning to go straight and do a workout right away, like weightlift or something, then it's not a big deal. You don't have to worry about this tip. But if you're depressed, then you're probably not waking up and going to work out, right? Also, I want to talk about for all the young men that are around my age watching this, you're probably very concerned about your testosterone, right? It's all over the internet, and you probably know that it has an effect on your mood, your sex drive, like all these important things that you need as a man. And since this channel is about fitness, as a man, obviously having more testosterone is better than not having enough, because if you don't have enough testosterone, you're going to have these bad things that I just said, like lowered sex drive, even erectile dysfunction, and you'll have a lot harder time maintaining or obtaining lean muscle mass, right? So if you're man, I mean, this is for women as well. Testosterone for women is very important as well. But I do want to mention that if you want to help regulate your testosterone as a man, I would heavily recommend researching ways to lower your cortisol, because if your cortisol levels are high, it's directly correlated with, or I guess inversely correlated. So the higher your cortisol level is, the lower your testosterone levels are. And so whenever you wake up in the morning, don't chug that cup of coffee. Don't chug any like energy drink to go to school or something like that. As a young man, that is going to heavily go against the natural production of your testosterone. And along with that, along with the sunlight in the morning, I want to say that at least 8 hours of continuous sleep, that's required for you to have like a healthy level of testosterone. Because obviously we're going to talk about cortisol again. If you're not getting enough sleep, then your cortisol is going to be through the roof. And if you're waking up all the time during the night, that's going to be another video. But if you're waking up all the time during the night, that's going to affect your cortisol levels and subsequently your testosterone levels as well. I don't have this actually written down to talk about on my script, but it has been heavily researched that if you eat too much processed foods, that also goes against the natural production of your testosterone for a man, right? Okay, now let's go back to talking about natural. And the reason I love talking about natural, like, or nature and living naturally, is because I'm obsessed with evolutionary psychology, right? I think that we have a lot to learn from our ancestors in regards to living a fulfilled life, right? I think that living a fulfilled life is what most people want, because if your life is not fulfilled, then like, what's the point? Like, for example, I'm pretty sure our ancestors were not like sitting there and worried about, does my body look good today? How am I gonna get a six pack? Like these, like all these all these dumb artificial things that we worry about in the modern age. I'm sure our ancestors were not stressing about back then. It's more just about, where am I gonna get my next meal? So speaking of evolutionary psychology, let's talk about dopamine. And Andrew Huberman heavily dives into dopamine all the time. That's why I recommend that you watch it, because humans run almost completely on our dopamine reward system. But no, don't get it wrong. Dopamine is not the chemical of pleasure, right? It's actually the chemical that drives you to obtain that pleasure. So for example, whenever you're about to go eat like a nice, like juicy burger, or just any really highly palatable food, your dopamine levels will be here at your baseline, and they're going to increase like this. And then once, right before the peak right here, that's when you have the highest levels of dopamine, whenever you're about to obtain that reward. Once you obtain that reward, your dopamine levels immediately go back down, and they go down even below your baseline. And that's considered like a dopamine crash or a mood crash. And so that's why whenever you feel really good about accomplishing something, you're at the top of the world, right, in your head, like completing a marathon and stuff like that. Like, that's a huge win. But after that win and after that huge surge of dopamine, you're going to feel a lot shittier, like literally just minutes afterwards, because you subsequently just have to crash. That's the nature of our dopamine reward system. And it's unfortunate, but that's just true. That's why I recommend eating more like natural foods, because typically it's not like sauced up in all these unnatural oils and stuff like that, right? Whenever you cook your own beef at home and stuff like that, you can't really put like a whole bunch of like bad stuff on it. I mean, you can put some olive oil on it and then put some seasonings on it, but ultimately it's natural and it's gonna make you feel better. It's not gonna spike your dopamine as much as like a burger from McDonald's does. It's gonna spike your dopamine and you're gonna feel worse right afterwards. And the problem is, if you keep on eating that burger, your baseline is right here. You eat that burger, you feel really good. It's gonna crash, but then your baseline just gets lower, and your baseline gets lower every single time that you do something like that. And that goes into the topic of today's issue, especially with both men and women in my age. A lot of them, like including the past me, struggled with like drug dependence and drug addiction, right? It's absolutely terrible for the youth to be addicted to these drugs. It's terrible. This is definitely like an epidemic, because the problem is, first of all, you already know that your brain is developing and it's gonna like mess with the development of your brain, but that's common sense and we already know that. But it goes deeper than that. The problem is you're born with that baseline of dopamine. Everybody has a different baseline of dopamine. So like imagine like a literal graph. And the problem with like being addicted to a substance or overall just abusing your dopamine system, that is going to lead to your depression. And of course, with depression comes less activity, less social skills. Just imagine it like this. Anytime that you smoke weed, right? If you're a weed smoker, your dopamine levels are right here. The first time that you smoke weed, it's like, oh my God, I feel like I'm on top of the world. And then of course you're gonna have that crash, but then you're like, why don't I just go smoke again? And so you smoke again, you go up, but you don't go up as high, and then you crash. And you do it again, the peak is way lower again. And so that's why it doesn't feel nowhere near as good as the first time that you did it. So that's why depending on substances for mental health is a terrible idea. And actually in more severe cases for people who smoke like 3 to 4 times a week or more, the problem is when you abuse a substance like that so consistently, your baseline is just going to drop and drop and drop and drop. And trust me when I say this, I know how it feels. Whenever your baseline gets to a certain point, that's when psychiatrists would start to consider you, oh, you're majorly depressed, or you have MDD, major depressive disorder. Having major depressive disorder is, it impacts your life in so many different ways. Luckily, I've been psychiatrically medicated, and I also do many healthy things in my day-to-day life that have made me feel like I'm not really depressed anymore. But that's the problem. Whenever you have major depressive disorder and you're not like doing these healthy things, or you're not getting medically treated, your baseline is just gonna be stuck there, and you're not gonna have enough dopamine, enough motivation to do any of the things that are going to help you in the long term. You're just going to reach for those things, the instant gratification that helps you in the short term. Because it's addicting, it's easy. It's easy to eat junk food because it tastes good and you don't have to cook it. It's easy to smoke weed and forget about your problems because you forget about your problems. It's easy to sit there and play video games all day because, just like weed, you're gonna forget about your problems. Your dopamine is what's going to drive you to do the things that you need to do for the long term. And that's all I need to say about dopamine. All right, you're probably thinking like, okay, so how the hell do we fix it, right? Well, that's when we go back to talking about living naturally. Not just like getting sunlight in the morning and like eating healthy. I'm talking about surrounding yourself with the people that you love, conversating with the people that you love. That's gonna give you more happiness because of the oxytocin that's produced in your brain. Not only that, living naturally comes with immersing yourself in nature. When was the last time you've just like went outside and enjoyed the trees around you, right? And please don't try and make excuses about where you live. I live in the city and there's plenty of like nature trails and stuff like that around me that I always go to, and I bring my dog to as well. Stop going for instant gratification. If you're gonna take one thing from this video, I just want you to take the fact that you need to stop going for that instant pleasure. If it's giving you instant pleasure, I can bet 9 times out of 10 that it's not gonna help you live a better life. And that's what you're on this channel for. You're on this channel so you can live a better life. And that's what I'm gonna help you to do. But I can't help you to do that if after this video, you're just gonna hop off and just start scrolling through TikTok. Or you're gonna hop off this video and go smoke some weed. Or you're gonna hop off this video and go drink. Instead of that, that's applicable to you for the next hour, go get a book and go read at your nearest park. Try to find a more secluded spot so you're not so distracted, but go immerse yourself in nature and read and just see how you feel afterwards. Yeah, you're not gonna feel like you just like smoked or you just played video games, but you'll feel content. Like, I don't need these other things to feel content, right? So, that's all I really want to talk about today. Really, really research dopamine, research Andrew Huberman, listen to his podcast. And like I said, if you're feeling too lazy to, it's fine. I'm going to be putting the information on here. All right, anyways, guys, that's all I have to say right now. As I said in the last video, get off this video, click off this video, go do something, okay? I don't have anything else to say. Stay disciplined and have a good day.